Welcome to Twisted Comics, your go-to YouTube channel for in-depth motion comic critique and storytelling.
5 twisted comic panels you won't believe were actually banned. What if I told you that for decades, a secret police force patrolled the pages of Marvel and DC? They weren't hunting supervillains. They were hunting ideas. They lurked in the shadows of every panel, dictating what heroes could say, what villains could do, and what you, the reader, were allowed to see. This wasn't some convoluted comic book plot. This was real. This was the Comics Code Authority, and they had the power to censor, change, or effectively ban any comic they deemed too shocking. Born from a nationwide moral panic in the 1950s, this tiny, unassuming seal of approval held the entire American comic book industry in an iron grip. For nearly 50 years, it decided the fate of stories, neutering mature themes, erasing challenging ideas, and sometimes burying entire issues. It wasn't a government agency, but it might as well have been. Distributors often refused to carry books without the seal, making it a de facto censor for the whole industry. Today, we're unsealing the vault. We're journeying back to a time when comics were considered so dangerous they had to be policed. We re-pulling back the curtain on 5 legendary panels and storylines from Marvel and DC that were deemed too twisted, too controversial, or too shocking, and were officially altered, censored, or banned. These are the images and stories you were never supposed to see. Section 1. The racially charged Astronaut the Code Tried to Erase. Coming in at number 5 is a story that reveals the true ugly nature of censorship. It's a tale not of gore or horror, but of prejudice, and it comes from the legendary and ultimately tragic EC Comics. The year is 1956. The comic is Incredible Science Fiction Ash 33, and the story is called Judgment Day. To understand why this story was so explosive, you have to understand the world it was born into. The mid-1950s was the dawn of the Comics Code Authority, or CCA, a moral panic fueled by psychiatrist Frederick Wertham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, had swept the nation. Wertham claimed comic books were a direct cause of juvenile delinquency, which led to Senate hearings and the industry scrambling to police itself to avoid government regulation. The result was the CCA, a self-censorship body with a list of rules practically designed to kill creativity. The code explicitly banned things you might expect: gore, excessive violence, and nudity. But it also had vague, insidious rules. One section stated, policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. Another read, ridicule or attack on any religious or racial group is never permissible. On the surface, that last rule sounds noble. But in the hands of the code's administrator, Judge Charles Murphy, it was twisted into a tool of racial bias. No publisher felt the CCA's wrath more than EC Comics. Before the code, EC was the king of crime and horror, with titles like Tales from the Crypt. They were visceral, shocking, and wildly popular, and Wertham's primary target. With the new code, which barred books seeking its seal from using words like horror and terror in their titles and outlawed monsters like vampires and zombies, EC's entire business model was obliterated overnight. Forced to pivot, EC publisher William Gaines launched a new line of New Direction comics, including Incredible Science Fiction. These were tamer, code-approved books, but they kept EC's intelligence and social commentary. And that's where Judgment Day comes in. The story, by Al Feldstein and Joe Orlando, is a powerful allegory against segregation. It follows an astronaut named Tarleton, a representative of the Galactic Republic, visiting the planet Cybrinia. His mission is to see if this world of robots is worthy of joining the interstellar community. He finds a technologically advanced society with a deep, ugly flaw. The robots are divided into orange and blue races. Despite being identical, The blue robots are treated as second-class citizens. Tarleton is disgusted and declares Cybernia is not ready. As he boards his ship in the final powerful panel, he removes his helmet, revealing himself to be a black man. The beads of sweat on his face, the comic notes, twinkle like distant stars. It was a brilliant twist, a direct condemnation of segregation in 1956 America. And the Comics Code Authority wanted it gone. When EC submitted the story, Judge Murphy rejected it. Here's where accounts differ slightly. Some, like editor Al Feldstein, recalled Murphy demanding the astronaut be changed to a white man. Other accounts say Murphy's main objection, based on the code's rule against ridiculing any racial group, was the beads of sweat on the black astronaut's face. Whatever the specific demand, the racist subtext was clear. A furious William Gaines got on the phone and threatened a press conference and a lawsuit, exposing the CCA's bias. Realizing he was on shaky ground, Murphy backed down. Gaines and Feldstein published Judgment Day, exactly as intended, black astronaut, sweat and all. It was a moral victory, but a Pyrrhic one. The constant battles with the CCA had financially drained EC Comics. Incredible Science Fiction number 33 was the last comic book they ever published. Gaines' company didn't fold. He just shifted focus to his hit humor magazine Mad, effectively censoring EC's comic line out of existence. Section 2, the anti-drug issues that broke the code. Coming in at number 4, we have a story that didn't just get censored. It defied the censor and dealt a critical blow to the CCA's power. This is the story of how Spider-Man, at the direct request of the U.S. government, took on drug abuse and forced the comics industry to grow up. The books in question are the Amazing Spider-Man issues number 96 through number 98, published in 1971. By the early 70s, the CCA was still powerful, but the culture was changing. Real-world problems were starting to creep into the world of superheroes, and one of the biggest was drug abuse. In 1970, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare approached Stan Lee. They wanted Marvel to create a story warning young readers about the dangers of drugs, believing Spider-Man could deliver the message more effectively than any PSA. Stan Lee was happy to oblige. He, artist Gil Kane, and inker John Romita Sr. crafted a 3-part storyline where Peter Parker's best friend, Harry Osborn, spirals into an addiction to pills. The story doesn't glamorize drug use. It portrays it as bleak and destructive, showing Harry hallucinating and collapsing from an overdose. For a mainstream comic in 1971, this was heavy stuff. Confident he was doing a public service, Stan Lee submitted the issues to the CCA for approval. The response? Rejected. The problem wasn't an explicit rule banning the word drugs. Instead, the code had a broad clause against anything contrary to the spirit and intent of the code, and are considered violations of good taste or decency. And the CCA used this to enforce a blanket ban on any depiction of narcotics, even in a negative light. Stan Lee was in an impossible spot. He had an important story the government itself asked for, and a censorship board that wouldn't let him publish it. Lee later said he understood the CCA as literal-minded position, but that didn't mean he agreed with it. So he made a landmark decision. He said, screw it. For the first time, a major publisher, Marvel Comics, decided to publish its flagship title without the seal of approval. In May 1971, The Amazing Spider-Man number 96 hit newsstands with a conspicuous empty space on its cover. It was a huge gamble. Many distributors and retailers refused non-code approved comics, but the world didn't end. The issue sold well, and the public reception was overwhelmingly positive. The controversy made the CCA look absurd. Humiliated and facing irrelevance, they had no choice but to change. Later that year, the code was officially revised to allow the depiction of drug addiction, as long as it was presented as a vicious habit. This act of defiance cracked the CCA's foundation. Stan Lee proved a comic could survive and even be praised for breaking the rules. A few months later, DC published its own famous drug storyline in Green Lantern Green Arrow, where Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy is revealed to be a heroin addict. Thanks to Marvel's rebellion, those issues did get the CCA seal. Section 3. The challenge story that crippled Batgirl. Number 3 on our list isn't censorship by the code, but a story so dark and psychologically brutal, it remains one of the most controversial mainstream comics ever published. We're talking about Alan Moore and Brian Bolland's 1988 masterpiece, Batman, The Killing Joke. By the late 80s, the code was losing its teeth. Creators like Frank Miller and Alan Moore were pushing boundaries. Moore, fresh off Watchmen, set out to deliver his definitive take on the Joker, and it was chilling. The Killing Joke explores the Joker's philosophy. All it takes is one bad day to drive a person insane. To prove it, he targets Commissioner Jim Gordon. But to truly break Gordon, the Joker decides to attack his daughter, Barbara Gordon. In the story, Barbara is retired from her life as Batgirl. When she answers her door, she finds the Joker, who shoots her at point-blank range, severing her spine and paralyzing her. The horror continues as the Joker has his thugs undress her, and he takes photographs of her agony. While a sexual assault isn't explicitly shown, the heavy implication of violation has fueled controversy for decades. The Joker then kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and forces him to view giant, gruesome photos of his wounded daughter. The Killing Joke was hailed as a landmark story. It gave the Joker a tragic backstory as a failed comedian, an origin that influenced many later adaptations, like the 2019 Joker film. However, a backlash quickly formed, centered on the treatment of Barbara Gordon. To many, she was a victim of fridging, a term for when a female character is brutalized or killed just to motivate a male hero. One of DC's most prominent heroines was crippled and abused to serve a philosophical debate between Batman and the Joker. Even Alan Moore has expressed deep regret. In an interview, he recalled pitching the idea to his editor, Len Wein. He said, "I asked DC if they had any problem with me crippling Barbara Gordon. He said, yeah, okay, cripple the bitch." Moore has since called the story too nasty and admitted it put too much melodramatic weight on the character. Because of its mature themes, The Killing Joke is frequently challenged in schools and libraries. The aftermath, however, is a testament to creative resilience. Writers Kim Yale and John Ostrander, unhappy with Barbara's treatment, reinvented her. Confined to a wheelchair, but armed with her genius intellect, Barbara Gordon became Oracle, a powerful information broker for the entire superhero community. For many fans, Oracle became even more beloved than Batgirl ever was. The Killing Joke remains a twisted masterpiece, a turning point where comics forced readers to grapple with uncomfortable material that still sparks debate today. Section 4. The recalled panel that exposed a retired Spider-Man. For our second-to-last entry, we leap forward to 2006, long after the CCA's prime. This story proves that even in the modern age, a single panel can be deemed too shocking, forcing a major publisher like Marvel to react. This is the bizarre case of the full-frontal Spider-Man in Spider-Man Reign. Written and drawn by Kari Andrews, Spider-Man, Reign was pitched as Marvel's answer to The Dark Knight Returns. It's a dark, dystopian future where superheroes are outlawed, and Peter Parker is an old, broken man haunted by the death of his wife, Mary Jane. The series was published under Marvel's T+, Teens and Up rating, signaling mature material. And it was bleak. In a truly twisted reveal, Venjay's death was caused by cancer she developed from long-term exposure to Peter's radioactive bodily fluids. In the first issue, Andrews decided to visualize Peter's despair in a shocking way. An elderly, haggard Peter Parker is sitting on the edge of his bed, the picture of defeat. and he is completely, unambiguously naked. For the first time, the artwork clearly depicted Peter Parker's genitals. The art wasn't sexual. It was a somber image meant to convey vulnerability. But it was also full-frontal male nudity of one of the world's most recognizable characters. Soon after the issue shipped, Marvel got cold feet. While a formal, widespread recall isn't fully documented, Marvel did issue a content advisory, making the comic returnable for retailers. The stated reason was that the book contains an image that may be misinterpreted by some readers as inappropriate. This was likely corporate speak for worrying about the public relations nightmare of selling material deemed indecent to minors, despite the T+ rating. It was a classic case of self-censorship, driven by fear of controversy. The issue was altered for all subsequent printings, including the collected edition. In the new version, Peter's body is conveniently cloaked in heavy shadow. The original first printing became an instant collector's item because of its twisted panel. The incident highlighted the ongoing double standards regarding nudity in art. Female characters had been drawn in far more sexualized ways for decades, yet a non-sexual depiction of a naked male hero was deemed a step too far. It shows that even without a formal censorship body, the threat of public outrage and corporate risk aversion can still get a panel effectively banned. Section 5. The Monster Mash Ban and the Birth of the Living Vampire. Finally, at number 1, we have a ban that targeted an entire genre. This was a systematic purge of fiction's most iconic figures, a rule so sweeping it forced creators into bizarre workarounds. We're talking about the Comics Code Authority's absolute ban on classic monsters. When the CCA laid down its rules in 1954, it took dead aim at horror comics. One of its most devastating rules stated, scenes dealing with, or instruments associated with Walking Dead, torture, vampires, and vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism are prohibited. Just like that, Dracula, the Wolfman, and their undead brethren were banished from mainstream comics. For years, if you wanted a monster story, you had to find loopholes. The ban was on supernatural monsters. So many stories pivoted to science fiction. Perhaps the most fantastic example of this creative contortion is Sauron, from the pages of X-Men. Writer Roy Thomas wanted a vampire villain in the late 1960s, but the code said no. While not confirmed as a direct workaround, it has widely inferred that he created Sauron in response, a villain who was a kind of energy vampire that absorbed life force. To make it even less like a traditional vampire, he was a humanoid pterodactyl. An energy-draining dinosaur was fine by the code's standards, but a classic caped count was not. That's how twisted the logic had become. This monster ban remained until 1971. As we discussed, Marvel's defiance with the Spider-Man drug issues forced the CCA to modernize. The board revised the code, finally allowing vampires, ghouls, and werewolves as long as they were handled in the classic tradition of literature, like Dracula and Frankenstein. Zombies, however, were still considered to have less literary merit and remained restricted for a while longer. This change opened the floodgates for a horror revival, and the character who led the charge was a direct result: Morbius, the living vampire. Debuting in the Amazing Spider-Man 101, the very next issue, after the code-defying drug story Morbius, was Marvel's first vampire character of the new era. But they were still cautious. Writer Roy Thomas and artist Gil Kane didn't create a supernatural creature. Instead, Dr. Michael Morbius was a scientist who, trying to cure his rare blood disease, experimented with vampire bat DNA and electroshock therapy. The result was a pseudo-vampire. He had the fangs and thirst for blood, but he was a product of science, not magic. He was a living vampire. This scientific origin was a clever safety net. If there was a backlash, Marvel could argue he wasn't technically a supernatural vampire. The CCAS monster ban shows the ultimate twisted logic of censorship. It didn't eliminate horror. It just forced it into strange, often ridiculous shapes. A perfect encapsulation of the decades-long battle between creative freedom and moral panic. Conclusion and CTA. From a black astronaut whose very existence was a protest, to a government-requested story that broke the rules, to a shocking act of violence that redefined a hero, to a single nude panel that caused a stir, and finally, to a ban on an entire genre. The history of comic book censorship is a wild ride. For decades, the Comics Code Authority acted as a gatekeeper. But what these examples show is that creativity is resilient. For every rule, there was a creator looking for a loophole. For every ban, there was an act of defiance. These panels aren't just trivia. They are battle scars from a long war for the soul of the medium. This battle continues today, not with a code, but with school board challenges, library bans, and online pressure campaigns. The medium has changed, but the impulse to control what others can read has not. So, what do you think? Which of these panels do you find the most shocking? And are there any other infamous banned comics that I missed? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this journey into the secret history of comics, do us a solid and hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the four-color world. Thanks for watching.